much is an hour of your time worth? Whether you're a realtor, lawyer, accountant, or even a content creator, Stamps.com gives you the ability to focus your time on what you do best, not on tedious mailing and shipping tasks. Print stamps, shipping labels, or certified mail forms in seconds. More than 4 million customers have relied on Stamps.com to make their lives easier. Go to Stamps.com/audio for a special offer. No contract, cancel anytime. That's Stamps.com/audio.
Hi, everyone. This is Jillian with Court Junkie. Court Junkie is a true crime podcast that covers court cases and criminal trials using audio clips and interviews with people close to the cases. Court Junkie is available on Apple Podcasts and podcastone.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 296 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I am really doing well compared to what my last couple of weeks have been.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm really getting back on track.
That's good, man.
Yeah, it is good, because I was really down there for a couple of weeks, and I appreciate all the well wishes that people have sent. It means a lot. What do we got going on? We're going to do Patreon names?
Like to do that.
Okay. So we had Lisa Sharphorn.
Sharphorn?
Okay.
Yeah.
Put the emphasis wherever you want.
I did.
Krista Wexall.
Hey, Wexall.
Charlene.
What's going on, Charlene?
Shayla Hayward.
What's happening, Hayward?
Tracy Nail.
Hey, Tracy.
Faith Aguilar. Gina Marion.
What's happening, Marion?
Justin Keller.
Appreciate that, Justin.
Miss Elise.
Hey, appreciate that, Elise.
Tiffany Ford.
What's up, Ford?
Sandy Bingman.
The Bingman.
Melissa Kennedy jumped out to her highest level.
Hey, Kennedy, appreciate that so much.
Heather Kraft.
What's up, Kraft?
Erica Williams.
There's Williams.
Daniel Holztrager.
Hey, Daniel, what's going on?
Lupe.
Good old Lupe.
Jamie Brown.
Hey, Jamie.
Jamie Phillips jumped out to her highest level.
Another Jamie, thank you.
And last but not least, Susanna Pemberton.
Ooh, Pemberton. It sounds like a really tasty bread.
Okay, I'm not going to touch that one. Let's just leave that one and go into the vault. This week, we selected Colleen Butcher.
Butcher in the house.
Yeah, so we appreciate the new support, the continued support. We had some very amazing PayPal donations. Alice Yang sent what was probably been the biggest PayPal donation we've ever had.
You're awesome, Alice.
But also Erica Grenier and Keir Vernon sent very large donations.
Well, thank you, Erica, and thank you, Keir.
Yeah, amazing support all the way around. So, Gibbs, on our weekly Patreon thing that we do, we talked about Donald Blum, who died in prison. You know, we did that episode. He murdered convenience store clerk Katie Poirier back in 1999. Well, he died this week. So, you know, that was news. And then we talked a lot about the Moscow, Idaho University murders and the suspect that they've arrested. So if you're not signed up for Patreon, now's a great time heading into this new year of 2023. Also, CrimeCon is coming up in September in Orlando, Florida. So if you're going and you're going to buy your tickets on crimecon.com, use our promo code TCAT, TCATT. You'll get 10% off your standard badge price.
Just stay away from the pool area if Fergie's there.
Yeah, it gets Frank the Tankish, especially after 10 o'clock at night.
Especially that swimsuit you wear. I don't know if it's even legal.
It's legal in 3 states. So right now on True Crime All the Time, we have an episode out on T. Eugene Thompson. You know, this was a guy who was convicted of hiring a hitman to murder his wife in order to obtain a bunch of life insurance money. But this is a case with a lot of moving parts, an affair, a whole web of conspirators and this kind of successful but also unsuccessful murder for hire plot.
Has many twists and turns.
Yeah, it does. All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm ready.
This is part 2 and the last part on the murder of Betty Gore and the case against Candy Montgomery. In part 1, we discussed how the two families met, Allan and Candy's months-long affair, almost a year-long affair, and the death of Betty Gore. In this episode, we'll cover Candy's murder trial and the case's aftermath. According to Oxygen, Candy was questioned a second time on June 17th, 1980. Her defense attorney, Robert Udashin, said her position at that point was she didn't have anything to do with the killing. Candy refused to take a polygraph.
Nothing wrong with refusing to take one of those.
No, I mean, this is 1980. Obviously, polygraphs were viewed in a much different light back then.
Sure.
I think today, for sure, I would not take a polygraph. I don't trust them. I've said that before. But, really, even back then, should it have been viewed, the decision to not want to take a polygraph, as being deceitful, being guilty? No. But was it? And I think, to be honest, back then it was.
Yeah. I think people put a lot of weight into them.
I think the prevailing thought was, if you had nothing to hide, then why wouldn't you submit to a polygraph test? Well, now we kind of know that there are flaws and, false readings and all kinds of different things.
So why would you put yourself up for that, right?
Yes. Yeah. But it is kind of interesting, as we go through these cases, to look at today versus the time frame when things are occurring in a case. On June 1980, a Dallas County fingerprint expert confirmed that a bloody fingerprint found on the fridge and a set of prints from the female suspect were the same print. Wiley Police Chief Royce Abbott said that no arrest of their major suspect was planned immediately. The Dallas County Sheriff's Office Department said the suspect was a family friend. Abbott said there were several suspects in addition to this primary suspect. Well, there's no doubt, right? The primary suspect here, without them naming her, is Candy Montgomery.
Exactly.
Family friend. But what I did want to point out is that, number one, they're calling her the primary suspect without naming her, but also saying, in addition to her, there were several other suspects. Days later, the police used the fingerprint and shoe print to get an arrest warrant for Candy Montgomery. These pieces of evidence were listed in the affidavit submitted to request her arrest. The affidavit stated that a bloody fingerprint was found on a deep freezer near Betty's body and matched Candy's left thumbprint, and shoes owned by Candy Montgomery made a bloody shoe print. Candy, along with her attorney, surrendered on the evening of June 26th. She was arrested and charged with murder.
I mean, not great evidence, but not bad evidence either, right? I mean, it's going to get them the arrest warrant.
Yeah, obviously it was enough to get the arrest warrant. Does it prove that she's the murderer? That's kind of one of the things that I look at with that type of piece of evidence. Or does it only prove that she was in the home at some time after the murder occurred?
Yeah.
Because obviously the murder has to occur for the blood to be there, and then she has to walk through the blood,
right?
Somehow get the blood on her hand and then touch the freezer. So, but I think, from the prosecution standpoint, you're looking at that and thinking, oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Doesn't mean a defense attorney's not going to try to, plant seeds of doubt in the mind of a jury, but as the prosecution, you'd want to have it rather than not. According to Oxygen and the investigator Defabah, she's arrested, and I'm the one to actually read her rights. Some female jailers strip searched her, took off all her clothes, and that's when they notice all these bruises and also a cut on her toe. So the police believed Candy killed Betty after she found out about the affair and confronted her. Candy was babysitting Alyssa and stopped by to pick up a swimsuit on the morning of June 13th, and she killed Betty. Candy then went home, changed clothes, and went to church without telling anyone what happened. So that's their theory in a nutshell.
Pretty good theory.
But is it any more than a theory? Again, how do you prove that?
Yeah.
When there were only 2 people in that home at that time.
Right.
One, Betty Gore, was murdered.
Yeah.
And can offer nothing. The second person they allege was Candy Montgomery. She's not copping to it.
Nope.
At this point.
And then you have the infant, which, obviously can't do anything.
Well, yeah, forgot about the baby, but
right.
Very, very young, can't talk, not going to be able to add anything. But it is a good theory because we know there was an affair.
So you got motive.
Well, we also talked about suspicions on the part of Betty about the affair. So if you surmise that she found out about it, her suspicions were confirmed, and she made the decision that she was going to confront her friend, Candy, about sleeping with her husband, you could see how things could have gotten out of control very quickly.
For sure.
And it's pretty hard to say that you weren't there. We know she was there. She even admitted she was there to pick up the swimsuit. But we also know she was there because of the bloody footprint and the bloody handprint. Candy was released on bail. She hired Don Crowder, a lawyer from her church. Her second attorney was Robert Udashin. Don Crowder usually did personal injury cases. According to Texas Monthly, he had never even been close to a murder case before, and suddenly he had the hottest one in Texas on his hands.
Talking about being shoved in the limelight.
Yeah, but also, to me, talk about being maybe out of your depth, right? You're a personal injury lawyer. You do not try criminal cases, murder cases. And you're telling me that this is going to be your first one?
I'd be extremely nervous. If I was Candy, I would be really nervous to the point I'd be like, can we get somebody else coming in?
But she hired him.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I would think maybe you might want to rethink that process.
Yeah. I mean, she had a choice. It said she hired Don. Now, you said you would be nervous if you were her. I'd be nervous if I was him.
That too.
Man, I'm in the spotlight.
Yeah.
I've never done this, and I'm responsible for this person's freedom, life, whatever it turns out to be.
And it wasn't like they didn't have money. I mean, I remember her husband was making something like $100,000 a year back at that time, which was a good amount of money. Probably more money than some attorneys made.
Yeah, back then it probably was. The community was extremely shocked by the killing, and even the police, it was said, struggled to understand how Candy could be a killer. Many people in the community and church supported her almost every day. The Montgomerys received around 6 dozen greeting cards.
That's a lot of greeting cards.
Yeah. I mean, that's more than you get. And you get a lot of greeting cards, love letters. Most of them come from penal institutions.
Yeah.
But they still count. Or at least you count them on your tally board.
I do. Appreciate it, guys.
Jim Atkinson and John Bloom wrote for Texas Monthly, the police who investigated Betty Gore's death at first could not believe that anyone as small as Candy Montgomery had the physical strength to wield that axe so brutally.
I kind of agree with that.
And I think you said it in episode 1.
It'd be tough. You know, what people don't know is over this weekend, you have all this lumber, I would call it, logs out in your backyard. Mm-hmm. And to try the theory out, you had me come over for hours.
Just split logs.
And see how long I can swing that. And if for some reason you want to do multiple takes.
Right.
So,
and you did 4.
Yeah.
4. That's how many you could do.
That's it.
But even as their suspicions about her grew, they just continued to find it very hard that this pretty, vivacious, normal suburban housewife could make such a vicious attack, right? She was a loving mother, a devoted wife, a churchgoer, everyone's friend. And to them, it didn't seem as though she was putting on a cynical act. She really was as normal and likable and good as she appeared, except for one dark corner of her soul that even she did not know about. So that's what they wrote in Texas Monthly. But I get it, right? The police are looking at her. She appears to be the prime suspect, but she also appears to be the loving suburban housewife.
Wouldn't hurt a flea person.
Petite. Yeah. I mean, you don't picture her as the axe wielding homicidal maniac.
Yeah.
It would be hard to do.
Yeah.
According to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Candy's attorney, Don Crowder, said that both families knew about the affair and continued their friendship. He said, these are intelligent people who had made a mistake. They talked it over and resolved it. They decided it was something that had occurred and had ended, and that it wasn't worth destroying 2 families over. Betty Gore and Candy were good friends. Maybe not great friends, but good enough that they kept each other's daughters, worked on the same committees in church, and sang in the same choir. Whatever differences they had long been settled, and there was absolutely nothing Candy wanted other than friendship from Allan Gore. Furthermore, Crowder said that Candy told the police about the affair unthinkingly, and that she was totally naive and honest about it.
Look, I don't believe that a family can get past something like that and still be friends. I mean, sure, maybe they helped each other out with their kids for whatever reason because their kids were friends. But I don't see a husband okay with the guy that was sleeping with his wife or the wife of the guy sleeping with Candy. I just don't see that happening.
No, I don't like to talk in absolute. So I will say I find it very difficult to believe. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I think it would be very, very tough. So what are you left with? Either that is true, and the problem being is that Betty Gore is not alive to refute it.
Right.
Or it didn't happen that way because she never knew about it until right before she was killed.
Yeah. I just think one, if not two of the spouses would always be wondering, why are they looking at each other that way? Is it happening again? You know, oh, he's running out for some groceries or whatever, or she's running out to get something really quick. Is that because she's going to meet or they're going to meet? Mm-hmm. I think it'd be tough in a marriage.
But I also think as the defense attorney, it helps Candy if people believe that Betty Gore knew about the affair well in advance of her death.
Absolutely, because it's if you can get the jury to believe that everything was okay now, that's good for Candy.
Well, then what's the motive?
Right.
What's the motive for the murder at that time?
Yeah.
Candy was released on a $100,000 bond posted on Friday, June 27th. Crowder said that when Candy went to church after her arrest, almost everyone hugged her and told her they believed in her. And I don't doubt that for a second. You know, I think, in scenarios like that, I think it's very tough for people to believe that this person they've known for a long time, they care about, they interact with, week in, week out, is a killer capable of delivering 41 axe blows to another woman.
I mean, Candy was very popular and loved in the community.
Yeah.
They don't want to believe that she could do something like that because that's going to change the community.
Well, and it also changes you, right? You are someone who knew her. So by extension, how could you be friends with this person who is capable of doing this? So is that part of it why people don't want to believe that their friends are capable of things like this? According to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Crowder and Udashin hired PIs to investigate Betty's death One PI said that a man killed Betty, but wouldn't elaborate. He also said that Candy was small, about 5'2", and Betty Gore was 5'8", with broad shoulders. He said he hoped the investigators would come to their senses and look for the real murderer. Crowder alleged that Candy's civil rights were violated the night of her arrest and that Sheriff Jerry Burton acted improperly because he didn't allow her to post bond and be released immediately. Candy was also strip searched and photographed without her consent. Investigators found bruises on her legs and a scratch on her toe and took her to the hospital without her consent. Then at the hospital, a doctor asked her to sign a consent form for an examination, but she refused. So a sheriff's deputy signed the form for her. They did the exam and took more photos.
Look, I understand about some of this, but if you're a murder suspect, I don't see why they would release you on bond right away. But I understand that you have rights and, the strip searching and the photos and all that. There might be a just cause for that. I don't know.
Well, but if you're arrested, do they not have the right to photograph parts of your body? I don't know the legalities of all of it, but once you're arrested, do you have to consent to all the different things? How much consent is there?
But I agree with you. I mean, you're under arrest. They're trying to do their due diligence here, right?
Sure.
But obviously, I mean, you want to put that up in the air, to the jurors, to your part of your defense is they treat her terrible. They stripped her and they did this. And
yeah, no doubt. My thought is if you had to consent to being strip searched and photographed and all of that stuff, then nobody who was arrested and charged would ever be strip searched or photographed, or nobody would consent. So we have so many people in the legal field that they'll reach out and let us know. But
look, I've been strip searched so many times anymore. When I hear them say, you need to come with us, I just start taking my clothes off right then.
Yeah.
I don't even wait for them to say strip search.
And
assume.
And you're not even arrested. I don't even know why you participate and have that stuff. True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening to Gibby and I talk, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, or maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you can be doing right now, getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy, and you could save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save nearly $700 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles in your policy, being a homeowner, and more. So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, national average 12-month savings of $698 by new customer survey who saved with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations. On a winter night in a small community near Denver, Colorado, Jim Matthews arrived home late. He expected to find his 12-year-old daughter, who'd been dropped off after a Christmas concert. But when he called out, "Hi, Janelle," the house was eerily quiet. His daughter's shoes were on the floor, but she was gone. And it would be 35 years before she would be found dead. After the discovery of Janelle Matthews' body in 2019, the police turned their attention to a man who had told law enforcement years ago that he knew something, but they dismissed him. The man did seem obsessed with the case, but is that all he was? A true crime fanatic or a killer? Wondery and Campside Media's podcast Suspect is back for a second season with a story that attempts to separate one man's true crime obsession from a motive for murder. This is a podcast that we know will be right up your alley, so definitely check it out. Listen to Suspect wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, Prime members, you can binge the entire series ad-free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app today. According to Crowder, the police were quoted as saying that they were trying to determine if an axe could have caused the cut on Candy's toe. And that makes sense, right? If you think about swinging an axe, very easy for it to come down, and you can hit yourself in the leg, you can hit yourself in the foot.
Sure can.
So I think once they see that cut and they knew an axe was used, they want to figure out if the axe could have made that cut. No doubt about it. Crowder and Udashin made a motion to throw out all of the evidence collected at the jail and hospital after Candy's arrest. The judge put off his decision to allow another judge who would be conducting a possible trial in the case to rule on the motion. The judge asked the attorneys and investigators not to discuss this motion, but Crowder broke the gag order because he claimed others leaked information to the press about it.
The old leaking to the press happens a lot.
And one side, if not both sides, but especially one side, and I would think a lot of times the defense, they're not going to like that gag order.
No.
You think of the defense as trying to get out ahead of everything, put stuff out there to maybe influence whoever's going to be on the jury later on. Crowder said that he found people who could testify about where Candy was on the day of Betty's death, but one of the times not accounted for was when Candy said she stopped at Betty's house to pick up the swimsuit. Crowder argued that the thumbprint found was not really Candy's, but if it were her fingerprint, she was in the house often, so that could explain it. He also said that it would be difficult to prove it was Candy's and that it was a bloody fingerprint. The print could have already been on the fridge and then smeared with blood later.
Maybe.
Yeah,
I'm not a fingerprint expert. So
I'm not
know.
either, but my assumption is that an expert could tell whether the blood is over top of the fingerprint or the fingerprint is actually made in the blood. I think that would be able to be determined.
I think so too, but again,
we're not experts.
No.
According to Texas Monthly, Crowder called a psychiatrist named Dr. Fred Faison in August 1989. Candy and Crowder went to Houston so that this guy could run some tests. 2 weeks later, Candy returned to Houston to undergo hypnosis with Faison. During that first official session, Candy reluctantly began with Vacation Bible School and told him everything about the morning of Friday, June 13th, even more than she had told Crowder, more than what her husband even knew. They talked a long time about control and anger and Candy's deep-seated unconscious fears. You and I have touched on hypnosis before. I know that there are people who are able to be hypnotized and maybe recall things that they are not able to. I've never tried it. I don't know if it would work on me, if it wouldn't work on me. I know some people are resistant to it. So my trouble is, when we talk about it in criminal cases, murder cases, I always feel as though I'm not sure whether I believe it in all instances, just because there is so much to gain, right? By a defendant maybe saying that there was this revelation that came out under hypnosis if it helped them.
Oh, of course.
And
it's always going to help them.
So I'm always looking at it a little bit, from a skeptical viewpoint because, okay, anytime something is in somebody's best interest, well, there's a kind of an added benefit to, pad it or make something up.
Yeah.
I guess for the lack of a better term.
This is where that Tom Cruise machine would come in handy.
Minority Report?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I hope he patent that.
Candy's trial started on October 20th, 1980. Don Crowder stunned the courtroom when he told prospective jurors that Candy had killed Betty. According to the UPI, the defense said that Candy would describe how she killed Betty, but there would be mitigating circumstances. Before trial, Candy's attorneys argued that she was innocent and that the police should be looking for a large man. Now, they argued the prosecutors had to prove the killing was intentional and not an act of self-defense.
Changing up their defense strategy.
Yeah, it's pretty much a 180.
It's a radical decision to make.
But why would they make it? Other than they made the decision that they're not going to be able to prove that she didn't kill. Yeah. Not that they have to prove, but they're not going to be able to counter the prosecution. The prosecution's going to prove that she struck the blows in their mind. So now it's not that she didn't do it, it's why she did it.
Yes. And how did she do it? I mean,
well, I'm sure everybody wanted to know that.
Absolutely.
The prosecution had evidence linking Candy to the scene and a reported confession to a polygrapher. According to the UPI, law enforcement described the crime scene on Tuesday, the 21st, under cross-examination by Don Crowder. Officers agreed that the killing was not undertaken with a great deal of care. Crowder was trying to show the killing was not premeditated. He also noted that Candy left behind blood and fingerprints and didn't even try to hide the axe.
Well, I mean, that's a good way to try to show that it probably could have been self-defense because it didn't look pre-planned, didn't look like the purpose of Candy being at the house that day was to kill Betty.
And they're also trying to make a big deal about, not getting rid of the murder weapon, not, cleaning everything up, not trying to get away with the crime, basically. On October 21st, Allan Gore testified about the affair with Candy. The next day, on the 22nd, witnesses testified about Candy's actions. On June 13th, she taught a vacation Bible school class in the morning and then went to lunch with friends. In between, she killed Betty. Betty Huffines, director of the church Bible school, testified that she and Susan Wright went to lunch with Candy. Candy didn't behave unusually at lunch or during class.
Just like a regular day.
And this is supposedly after she hit her friend Betty 41 times with an axe, killing her. Testimony from Steve Deffenbaugh on the 22nd revealed that Betty was hit several times after she was on the floor and possibly already dead. Candy Montgomery testified on October 23rd that she killed Betty in self-defense. She testified that Betty attacked her twice and she had to wrestle the axe out of her hands. The following information comes from an October 23rd, 1980 UPI article. Candy said she admitted to the affair with Allan when she and Betty were sitting together, and Betty said she knew about it. Candy swore that it was over. Betty said, "But you did have one, didn't you?" And Candy said yes. Betty left the room and then came back with an axe. Betty said, "I don't ever want you to see him again. You can't have him." Candy said, "Betty, don't be ridiculous. It was over a long time ago." Betty leaned the axe against the wall and seemed calm. Candy testified that their whole confrontation was very emotional because they were friends. Betty said as she got up to leave, "I don't want you to ever look at me again." Candy testified, "She looked so hurt and so distressed, and I reached out and put my hand on her arm and said, 'Betty, I'm so sorry.'" Betty then pushed her into the utility room, picked up the axe and said, "You can't have him. You can't have him. I've got to kill you." They started to struggle over the axe. Betty hit a glancing blow on the side of Candy's head and drew blood. Betty raised the axe over her head and swung it down. Candy ducked out of the way, but the axe hit her toe. They struggled over the axe. Candy managed to get the axe from Betty and swung at her. She hit Betty in the head, and Betty slumped down. Candy thought she had killed Betty. She tried to leave, but Betty suddenly slammed against the door to close it and grabbed the axe. Candy begged her, "Betty, let me go. Please let me go." They fought for the axe again. The handle was bloody from both of their wounds. Betty's hand slipped off the axe and she fell back.
Pretty detailed account of what happened that day in the beginning.
Well, and my assumption is everybody in that courtroom had to be mesmerized.
Yeah.
Focusing in on Candy telling her side of what happened during this event. And that's important to stress, right? It's her side. Betty Gore can't give her side of the story.
Not around to do it. But I'm sure the jurors and people in that courtroom were at the edge of their seats.
There is no doubt in my mind. And I'll be honest with you, if I was one of them, I would be too. I would be hanging on every word. Now, I think as a juror, I would still be extremely skeptical.
Yes.
Trying to weigh, is what I'm hearing the truth? But man, I'd really be paying attention.
That's for sure.
You might lose me during other parts of a trial, but you're not losing me when the defendant gets up there and describes the events that happened during the murder.
You're going to be focused at this time.
According to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Candy testified that after she took the axe, she begged Betty to stop, but Betty replied, shh, and came at her again. So she shushed her.
Which for some people is not a good thing.
According to Candy. According to the UPI, Candy testified, I didn't think at all. I raised it and I hit her. And I hit, and I hit her, and I hit her. Texas Monthly wrote that Candy only stopped hitting Betty when she was at the point of utter exhaustion.
Well, we know that was 41 times.
Well, and we talked about it in episode 1. I'm not going to sit here and say that, I'm in the peak physical condition that I would like to be. And I know for a fact, swinging an axe 41 times would drain me.
For sure.
And I'm 6'2", 240.
Yeah.
Now we find out that Candy was 5'2" and petite.
But at what point is it just overkill? It doesn't take 41 times to kill somebody.
No, absolutely not. According to Candy, we just talked about it. If you believe her, she thought she killed her very early on.
Sure.
And then she found out she didn't. And then, that part where she's saying, I wasn't thinking. I didn't think at all.
Yeah.
I just raised it and I hit and I hit and I hit and I hit. According to A&E, Candy admitted to taking a shower before she left. She went home, changed clothes, and went to church where her kids and Betty's daughter were at Bible school. She then went to lunch with friends. Candy later destroyed and threw out parts of the sandals she was wearing that day. And we kind of detailed that out in episode 1.
Yeah, that kind of frustrates me just generally because why not just throw the whole sandal out? Why keep any of the sandal?
Yeah, I didn't understand that at all. The one thing that I'm really struggling with is this kind of scene in my mind of how this murder took place. And it's absolutely a brutal scene juxtaposed against her then going to church and going out to lunch with her friends.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had rough days where things didn't go the way that I wanted them to. Let's say I got in a fight with somebody, a verbal, spat or whatever. It's kind of thrown me off
right
for the rest of the day where
lingers with you.
It lingers with me and I'm upset and I don't even want to go to lunch if I've got a lunch date or something like that. We're not talking about a verbal altercation. We're talking about hitting somebody and killing them with an axe 41 times.
Yeah.
And then you just clean up and go to TGI Fridays. Yeah. I just can't square it, dude. I can't.
It's like you are two different people.
It's almost robotic.
Yeah.
Like you would have to be emotionless to get through it.
Yeah.
According to the UPI, the state finished its case with testimony from Dr. Irving Stone, a crime analyst who said that Betty was killed in a case of overkill. And I think you mentioned it. It absolutely screams that. Dr. Stone said there was far more damage or injury than was needed to take the life. However, he did say that he found nothing to contradict Candy's self-defense claim. And that doesn't surprise me because how would you contradict it? You basically only have one person's version of events.
Sure.
And what at the crime scene or, is really going to say, yes, definitely this was self-defense? I don't know, other than Candy telling everybody that it was. According to ANETV.com, medical examiner Dr. Vincent DeMeo determined Betty's heart was beating for 40 of the 41 blows, but later testified She was most likely unconscious during most of the attack.
If you believe that, it makes me sick to my stomach. It all makes me sick to my stomach.
It does.
But it really gets me to think that someone had to go through that for 40 blows to their body.
Well, but we just got done talking about, the other doctor said there was far more damage than needed to take a life. And now this guy's saying, well, she was alive for 40 of the 41 blows.
Yeah. It seems hard to believe that when you hear everybody describe what the body looked like.
Now, it doesn't mean that it took 41 blows to kill her.
Right. Just meant the heart was still pumping.
Yes. I mean, she could have died from 2 or 3 blows, maybe died a little bit later. According to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, on October 24th, 1980, Judge Tom Ryan found Don Crowder in contempt of court for the second time since the trial started. This happened when Crowder told the court, "I'd like the record to show that the judge has been interfering with the questioning of the witness." Judge Ryan asked the jury to leave, and Crowder said, "Let the record show that since the trial started, you, Judge Ryan, have interjected your bias, and no, I won't lie down for you." Ryan said he was holding Crowder in contempt and assessed a 72-hour jail term to start when the court recessed, plus a fine and court costs. Judge Tom Ryan paused the trial on October 24th after a psychiatrist testified that Candy suffered from a dissociative reaction, in which some of her actions, including the slaying of Mrs. Gore, did not appear to be real, which raised questions about her competence.
It's a busy courtroom.
There's a lot going on.
With the case and with how the defense attorney feels about the judge.
And it reminds me of a show, and I cannot remember the name of the show, but the person kept saying, "Let the record show." And the judge said, "The record shows everything," because, there's somebody
right.
Writing down everything that that is said in the courtroom. So it made me think of that, and it was kind of funny. Obviously, this case is not funny, but that part was.
It was like something in that Joe Pesci attorney movie. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't think it was that one. It was something, something else. But
yeah,
the record will show everything is basically what the judge said. You don't have to keep saying, "Let the record show." So, but now we're in a different phase, right? First, it's self-defense.
Yeah.
But now, inside the courtroom, issues are being raised about the competency of Candy. Is she fit to stand trial? On October 25th, psychiatrist Thomas Thornton tested Candy at the request of Judge Ryan and found her competent to continue the trial. On the 27th, Dr. Fred Faison testified about the hypnosis sessions with Candy. Don Crowder hired him to help Candy uncover her memories. From these hypnosis sessions, the doctor learned that Candy suffered childhood trauma, which led to rage as an adult. He also helped Candy recall her memories of what happened on the day Betty died. According to the UPI, Dr. Faison testified that Candy released almost a lifetime of suppressed anger. When she killed Betty, Candy revealed that she was raised to be concerned about what other people think of her. Because of this, she rarely had outbursts of aggression. So again, I don't know if this is real or not. But one thing I have heard people say before is you kind of got to worry about those people who never get upset. It's like they're holding it all inside.
Buried inside of them.
For long periods of time, so that if they ever do lose it, it's going to be bad. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened in this case, but I think that's kind of what this psychiatrist is saying.
We all know somebody that does that, holds everything in.
Yeah, absolutely. During hypnosis, Candy revealed that she lost a foot race with another little boy when she was 4 years old. She was angry and grabbed a jar and threw it at a water pump. A piece of glass hit her in the forehead. While Candy was screaming on an exam table at the hospital, her mother told her, "Shh, what will they think of you in the waiting room?" And basically for the next 26 years, Candy held her rage in because she was worried about what other people would think about her.
There's people that grow up that way, that are taught
not to express their emotions, to hold everything inside.
Yeah.
Sure. No, absolutely there are. What was said was that Candy's rage was triggered when Betty shushed her after Candy begged her to let her go. Dr. Faison testified the blind rage began when Betty said, shh. Candy was not aware she was hitting Betty Gore with an axe after taking the weapon from her. In her mind, she was a mile away.
Yeah, she was somewhere else. She wasn't there in the room at that time.
She wasn't doing it.
Yeah, her body was there, but she wasn't.
You know, I thought that was the strangest part of the version of events from Candy, that Betty Gore would say, shh, shush her. I just thought that was a very strange part of her account. Well, obviously it's coming back in a big way.
Well, now we know why it's coming back, because it's a trigger for Candy,
according to this doctor. But could you ask the question, and I'll say, yeah, I think you can, was that added to be part of the defense?
Could you fabricate it in?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a valid question. I'm not saying it happened, just kind of going through some of the questions in my mind.
At the end of the day, like you said, there was 2 people and only 1 person survived to tell the story.
According to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Faison had interviewed Candy several times since August, including 4 to 6 hours under hypnosis. He agreed that Candy suffered from a dissociative reaction when she killed Betty. He described this as when a person is not part of the conscious system. Candy couldn't understand what triggered her to kill Betty. It was as if she was discovering a part of herself she did not know was there. They reported that Faison said, I believe the rage took over her when she kept pleading with Betty Gore. Betty, please don't. And Betty Gore replied, shh. So back to that shh, that is a big shh.
Some people just don't like to be shh.
In this case. According to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Candy said that it was like she wasn't even seeing Betty. When Faison told Candy about her emotions during hypnosis, she said, my God, you mean I killed my mother instead of Betty Gore? So that's an interesting question.
It is.
Obviously, she doesn't really mean actually killed her mother. But if her mother was the one who shushed her as a kid, and then Betty shushed her, it was like she was killing her mother.
Right.
Because that, is what triggered her. When Faison was asked why Candy didn't go to the police, he said that he believed Candy was ashamed about her loss of control, and that, in his opinion, Candy never intended to kill Betty. According to the UPI, the jury was taken out of the courtroom when Don McElroy, a polygrapher, testified that he believed Candy was telling the truth when she said she hit Betty to protect herself. He testified that Candy was under the direction of her attorney before she was arrested. Candy's attorney filed a motion to allow McElroy to testify. The judge said he'd consider it. State law prohibited the admission of polygraph results without the consent of the prosecution and defense. The prosecution said they'd oppose it.
Well, sure, it's not good for them at this point to have it submitted.
The defense presented witnesses who testified that Betty was a rude and moody person. Catherine Cook, a fellow teacher, said Betty was extremely tactless, and Betty once berated a mother to the point of tears. According to the UPI, one church member said under cross-examination that she never saw Betty in any type of altercation, and she was not an aggressive person. Reverend Ron Adams testified that Candy and Betty disagreed with how he ran the church. Betty was angry and voiced her disapproval loudly, but Candy was calmer. So you're always going to have character witnesses.
Sure.
Right? In a trial, that's obviously very normal. I think to have to get up and talk about, a murder victim in the way that one of these teachers did, okay, pretty tough. But you're asked to be truthful.
Yeah.
So assuming she was truthful, okay, that says something about Betty. It doesn't really mean that she provoked Candy or that she started anything, but, It's telling. But then you have one person who said, I never saw Betty as an aggressive person at all. Didn't see her in any altercation. So you've got a little bit of conflicting information there. Judge Tom Ryan allowed the testimony from the polygrapher Don McElroy. He testified on October 22nd that the polygraph test showed Candy probably had no intention of killing Betty Gore and supports her claim that she acted in self-defense. So, you mentioned it just a minute ago. It's not something that the prosecution wanted in.
No.
They already knew what was going to, come from it, but the judge ruled it admissible. So big blow for the prosecution.
Well, for sure, because it definitely doesn't help their case.
According to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Candy told him she experienced an explosion of rage she didn't know was within her. Candy did her polygraph on June 20th. McElroy said that Candy told him she killed Betty during a pre-test interview. The polygraph test indicated Candy was telling the truth when she said she didn't mean to kill Betty and that she was afraid when Betty brought the axe into the living room.
So her account to the polygrapher is that she was afraid when Betty walked into the room with the axe. Well, I think anybody would be afraid to see somebody walking into a room with an axe, especially if you've been sleeping with her husband. And of course, we know that some accounts put Betty at 5'8", much bigger than Candy. And we heard some testimony that Betty can be aggressive.
So, as we go through, what's coming out in the courtroom, I think you'd have to say that it's looking good for the defense. Putting yourself in the mind of a juror. You're hearing a bunch of doctors say that Candy didn't mean to kill Betty. She may not have even known she was doing it. She was a mile away. Then you have this polygrapher who's allowed to testify and basically said, he thought Candy was very truthful. When asked if he'd ever seen anyone successfully lie during a polygraph, McElroy said he'd never heard of it in his career. Now, I don't know how he would know, other than what the polygraph is telling him.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange question, really.
Unless it was later proven in court to be a lie, maybe.
Yeah.
Then that he was a case he was part of. Obviously, people have beaten polygraphs. We know that now in 2023. It is definitely possible. Crowder called on Faison and McElroy to prove Candy didn't knowingly and intentionally kill Betty, which was a requirement for a murder conviction. So, no doubt, very easy to see what the defense is trying to do, concede that Candy killed Betty, but get all these experts to tell the jury that she didn't do it knowingly and intentionally, and therefore shouldn't be convicted of murder.
Well, you kind of wipe out the intentionally if you get the jury to believe Betty started it by picking up the axe, right? Because then you're in self-defense mode.
Yes. I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
And then there's another part of she's not really even there in that moment once she starts swinging the axe.
Yeah.
She doesn't really know that she's killing Betty. But like any trial, right? All this stuff comes out and it's up to the jury to weed through it and decide who's telling the truth, whose argument, makes more sense, and who they're going to believe. According to the UPI, psychiatrist Clay Griffith testified for the prosecution. He disputed Dr. Faison's claim that an unconscious memory event triggered the attack, but did concede that he didn't examine Candy. He said it was impossible to pinpoint Candy's reaction to one specific incident in her life. The attack was not a dissociative reaction and certainly not tied to a specific incident. This is what he testified to. He called Candy's actions after she killed Betty very goal-oriented in manner, not someone wandering around, not knowing what to do. Okay, so now we have someone for the prosecution trying to refute some of the claims made by defense experts. I think, what this guy had going against him was the fact that he didn't examine Candy and obviously had to admit that.
Right.
But the one thing that he was trying to do was dispel this notion that the attack was triggered by the sh that went back to Candy's mom, shushing her when she was little. And then the other thing was, okay, the 41 blows are over. What does Candy do afterwards? Now, all of a sudden, she's not in this dissociative state. She's trying to clean up. She's taking a shower. She's doing this. She's doing that.
Yeah, you're right. Because she took that shower trying to clean herself up to get out the door.
But then she goes to church and to lunch. So nobody testified to this, but the question that kind of entered my mind was, what state was she in at that point? Was she still in this dissociative state, which would mean that she's just going about the rest of her day, kind of as if nothing happened, because maybe in her mind, she doesn't believe it's real.
Right.
Or is she being more calculating, as the prosecution witness is stating, and she's getting on to normal things to throw people off? Depends on whose side you're on.
Absolutely.
The final arguments were delivered on October 29th, 1980. During closing arguments, Crowder told the jury that the prosecution didn't present any evidence that refuted Candy's self-defense testimony and said, a reputation is something achieved over a lifetime. People who for 30 years have a reputation as a peaceable, law-abiding citizen do not go out and commit violence without there being some provocation. According to UPI, DA Tom O'Connell argued that in the state of Texas, a person can use deadly force only if a reasonable person would not have retreated. But there were opportunities for Candy to flee. He also argued that Candy hit Betty more times than was necessary, saying Betty Gore at some point in time was rendered incapable of fighting back. And at that point, the right of self-defense was no longer necessary.
That is how I always understood self-defense.
Yeah, I do think it varies somewhat, right, from state to state, and it has changed a lot over time, whether it's self-defense inside the home, the castle doctrine, and some of those things. But really, to me, they both make pretty good points. Candy did have kind of a sterling reputation, I believe. People loved her. You mentioned that. People in the community, they rallied around her.
Really
now,
did.
Does that mean that someone couldn't snap after, a perfect record? No, because people do it.
They do it a lot.
Now you look at, the state's argument and say that Candy had a lot of opportunities to flee. She didn't need to swing the axe 41 times.
Right.
Okay, I get that as well. But to me, it really comes down to the doctors, because if she is in this dissociative state, does she even know that how many times she's swinging?
No.
Does she know the state that Betty's in? Does she know that, as he put it, she's rendered incapable of fighting back? I keep putting myself in the mind of a juror thinking, okay, this is a tough one. There's a lot going on here.
It is a tough one. I mean, from Candy's side, you're looking at it as it could have shifted to a self-defense mode, and then she went into this trance, didn't know what she was doing, so that's why she didn't stop. And at that point, you're in the Candy camp, Mm-hmm. On the Betty side, I mean, you're thinking Candy could have stopped. Anybody could have stopped. And did Candy even need to do what she did?
Right. Or was it brought on because she was confronted about the affair,
Right.
and as the prosecution contended. On October 29th, 1980, Candy Montgomery was found not guilty of murder and manslaughter. The jury deliberated a little more than 3 hours. According to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Judge Ryan said after reading the verdict, I have sometimes been tempted to comment on a jury's verdict, but I never have before, and I will not on this verdict. Candy and her husband were escorted out of the courthouse with security because there had been death threats, As Candy left the courthouse, people shouted, "Murderer."
Those were the ones that did not love Candy in town.
They were not in the Candy Montgomery camp, for sure. One reporter went to Candy's house to talk to her. She opened the door holding a knife, but said, "Don't worry, I'm not dangerous," and smiled.
It's like a really weird thing to do after a trial like this.
Yeah. So I get it. Do you or do you not know this reporter is coming? If you do, you probably put the knife down before you open the door. If you're, let's say, cutting up some cantaloupe, maybe you take the knife with you, you forget to put it down. But, when you've just been on trial for murder, it is pretty strange. So she told this reporter she didn't remember much about the trial because she sat in her corner and blocked out as much as she could. According to A&E, one juror later told the Dallas Morning News the jury's opinion on the 41 axe blows. "We determined it never had a bearing on the verdict at all, whether it was one gunshot or 1,000 whacks." Betty's father, Bob Pomeroy, said after the verdict, "As far as I'm concerned, justice will be served. Montgomery has to live with it. I wouldn't say I was happy with the verdict. We don't know what happened, and we will never know what happened."
Well, he's right.
Yeah, he's absolutely right about that. Just like we said, there were only 2 people inside that room, and only one person lived to tell their side of the story. Now, I do want to talk about, what this jury member said, that it wouldn't have mattered whether it was one gunshot or 1,000 whacks, let's say from an axe. What that tells me was that they determined that she did not go there to kill,
right,
Betty Gore, that she acted, at least in part, in self-defense.
Yes.
And they didn't care how far she went, which may mean they absolutely agreed that she was in a dissociative state.
That's the way I take that too.
Yeah. I mean, didn't come out and say that, but that's kind of what I'm making from it. Don Crowder said that the family was moving to Atlanta, where Pat Montgomery would be employed by Georgia Tech University. The Montgomerys were forced to sell their house in Texas to pay for their legal expenses. So they moved to Georgia in January of 1981. In March of that year, Candy Montgomery filed a motion to dismiss a $1.5 million federal civil rights suit against Collin County officials. Don Crowder said Candy chose to drop the case because she wasn't up to it and didn't want to go to trial again. He noted that Candy had moved to Georgia and was trying to start over. Candy's suit accused Collin County authorities of illegally strip searching her, leaking information unfavorable to her to the news, and forcing Pat to testify before the grand jury.
Well, that's a lot of money to leave on the table, but if you feel like it's causing undue stress, I get it. But it's a lot of money to leave on the table if you think you are wrong.
And I don't know if it exactly applies to this case, but one of the things I often think about is when people are accused of something, charged with something, and forced to mount and pay for a defense, it often breaks them financially and then to be acquitted.
Yeah.
I always feel bad if somebody really didn't do something wrong and they lose everything that they ever worked for just to put up a defense so that they don't spend the rest of their life in prison.
Yeah, well, they had to sell their house to pay for legal expenses, so it's rough.
And I'm not saying that Candy Montgomery didn't deserve to go to trial. I'm not saying that at all. But I know there have been people where you and I have talked about it that the prosecution didn't really even have enough evidence. It doesn't even seem as though a grand jury should have let something go to trial.
Yeah.
And the case falls apart, but the person, has to spend a ton of money to try to defend themselves. And I don't think that's right. Pat and Candy eventually divorced. According to the Daily Mail, Candy goes by her maiden name and works as a mental health therapist. Candy is in her 70s today. According to a November 2022 article by Kim Bryan for the Crime Wire, Candy works with her daughter, Jenny, as a mental health therapist in Dawsonville, Georgia. Bryan received emails from Candy's daughter, who owns a counseling firm that her mother no longer works in that facility, despite several newsletter-type publications online which state otherwise. As of 2010, Pat Montgomery, now going by James Montgomery, was working with EMS Technologies Defense and Space Division in Georgia. Allan Gore remarried and divorced after Betty's death. He lost custody of his daughters to his former in-laws, and they became estranged. Both of Betty's daughters married. Charles Pomeroy died in 2003. Her mother, Bertha Pomeroy, died in 2010. And then Candy's attorney, Don Crowder, died of suicide on November 10th, 1998. The Candy Montgomery and Betty Gore case has been featured in movies and TV shows like the CBS television movie A Killing in a Small Town, the HBO Max series Love and Death, as well as a Hulu series titled Candy. That's the one with Jessica Biel. Yeah. A lot of people really liked that one.
Yeah, that was a good one.
And I know you watched it. You said you really liked it. In 2022, CBS 11 News interviewed 83-year-old Lester Gaylor, one of the neighbors who found Betty Gore's body. Gaylor said, "I've seen a lot of people die in a lot of different ways, but that's the worst I've ever seen. I lived with it day and night when it first happened." Okay. I'm not sure what this guy did for a living, but he said, "I've seen a lot of people die in a lot of different ways." So maybe he was in some kind of medical field or something. I don't know. What I will say is that I can't imagine many people being in a line of work where they would see something more horrific than Betty Gore.
Yeah. I mean,
and the way she was killed.
41 blows, mostly to the face. Tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely brutal. But as we wrap this one up, Gibbs, this is a case that remains highly controversial over 40 years later. It was back then, I think it still is today, pretty shocking because it involved extreme violence between two seemingly normal women in this close-knit community.
Yeah.
And then when you think about somebody admitting to delivering the 41 blows that killed this woman, but ultimately being acquitted of murder. Okay, well, that's going to fascinate people.
It is.
If you think about the case of Robert Durst, the Jinx, that was a fascinating documentary, not just from what came out at the end of it. What I really found fascinating, and I'm sure we'll cover him, someday, but was the murder that he committed in Texas and was acquitted of.
Yeah.
And it wasn't exactly like this, but in a somewhat similar scenario, right? It wasn't disputed that he killed and dismembered this man, but the jury didn't find the requirements there for murder.
Yeah.
So people find those types of cases fascinating. And, I don't know that the fascination with this case will go away because you and I talked about it before we started recording. You have people in both camps, right? You have a lot of people who believe Candy's version of events and that, she didn't mean to kill her. It was self-defense, or that she was in some type of dissociative state and therefore, it really wasn't murder. But then you have a lot of people on the other side that say, okay, all of that clouded what really happened.
Yes.
Which was that she murdered Betty Gore. And a lot of times you're never going to sway the opinion, or you're never going to move a person from one camp to another with the facts that we have now.
No, they're going to be locked in.
There would need to be something else.
Yeah.
To change maybe somebody's opinion. But, an absolutely fascinating case, tragic all the way around. But that's it for our case of the murder of Betty Gore, the case against Candy Montgomery. We got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Absolutely.
Hey, Mike. Hey, Gibby. It's Steven again. Just calling to let you guys know I did start the Unfunneled, and I like it. I don't see nothing wrong with that. I love the podcast. I love how you guys put in a lot of research into those as well, and you guys talk about the victims and the family of the victims, and you guys shed light on a bunch of other subjects. I appreciate everything you guys do once again, either whether it be Unsolved or T-Tat. I'm hooked. You guys got me. So I'll be waiting for that next episode, and I'll be catching up. I'm only on episode 10 today because I had to do the Unsolved at work. That's how I listen to you guys. So you guys have a great day, and I hope you guys had a great New Year and a great Christmas. And yeah, T-Cat all the way. Let's go. Let's keep you guys going. Let's get more podcasts, more episodes. All right. Stay safe. Keep your own time ticking, gentlemen.
Always love to hear from Steven. Great listener.
Yeah.
So glad that he's jumped over to Unsolved.
That's right.
Maybe a while before he hears his voicemail, but he's been on T-Cat. I know for sure. So we appreciate it.
We really do.
Very much.
Hey, Mike and Mike. It's Carrie from Colorado calling. You are just listening to the new episode, but I'm feeling better, Fergie. Like COVID's no joke. Anyway, I was just listening to the new episode. You mentioned the Supermax in Florence, and we live here in Colorado, and we have this little VRBO thing. And we had a guy stay here one time who was a guard at the Supermax. And my husband is always like super chatty with the people who stay here, and I take the Fergie approach to humans, which is, hi, how are you? Please, I didn't actually mean that. Actually, don't talk to me. I didn't mean that. Please navigate away from my, actually, I just go outside with my headphones on so that they know that I don't want to engage. But this was, of course, the one time that I would have wanted to engage with an actual human being, because he could be taking care of Ted Kaczynski or somebody. And my husband didn't mention until they were gone that this guy was a guard at the Supermax. I could have had a really rad story for you guys. No, my husband waits until they leave to be like, oh, by the way, did I mention that guy's a guard at the Supermax in Florence? No, you did not. Anyway, Happy New Year. Stay safe and keep your own time ticking. Bye.
that one cracked me up because she's got me pegged for sure. As far as, sometimes not wanting to engage. I can be very sociable.
Yeah.
In certain situations.
Sure.
Like when we go to Crime Con, I love to hang out with people. But, for the most part, I'm a solitary type of person.
Right.
Or a small group type person. Now, what I will say is that I would definitely want to talk to that person.
Oh, of course.
I mean, if you think of some of the people that are at Supermax, and I don't know, in Florence, I don't know right off the top of my head, Kaczynski, she mentioned, it is a place where they put some of the worst. So I'm sure there are some extremely notorious killers and criminals there.
Yeah, we've had a listener that worked at a Supermax.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, and they've contacted us, and they have a lot to say.
Yeah, well, those stories would be fascinating.
Yeah,
just to any little nugget about what this person is really like, or they're super nice. You wouldn't believe how nice they are. You just never know.
Yeah,
that's you never true. Know. All right, buddy, that is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So from Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
All month long on Pluto TV, stream the biggest Tyler Perry movies free. Watch your favorites like Medea's Witness Protection and Medea's Big Happy Family. Join Tyler Perry as he goes on a couples retreat with Sharon Leal in Why Did I Get Married? Or Idris Elba and Gabrielle Union in the Tyler Perry directed film Daddy's Little Girls. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows. Available on live and on demand. Download the free Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming now. Pluto TV. Drop in, watch free.
How much is your time worth? Whether you're a realtor, lawyer, accountant, or even a content creator, Stamps.com gives you the chance to focus your time on what you do best. Don't waste your time mailing letters or shipping packages. Stamps is there to help. Print stamps, shipping labels, or certified mail forms in seconds. Get up to 89% off USPS, UPS, and other carriers, and schedule free package pickups all from one place. Stamps.com also makes it easy to track shipments, manage contacts, and report on how much you send and spend. Over the last 28 years, more than 4 million customers have relied on Stamps.com to make their lives easier. Don't waste time worrying about being a postage expert or standing in line to drop off letters and packages. Let Stamps.com do what they do best so you can do what you do better. Go to Stamps.com/audio to sign up for a special offer. No contract, cancel anytime. That's Stamps.com/audio.